At 6:14 a.m. on November 3, 2022, a grainy security camera in the lobby of the Harbor Point condominiums captured a woman standing alone beside an elevator. She held a small cardboard box against her chest. Her eyes were swollen. The doors opened. She stepped inside. The camera clock ticked to 6:15. The doors closed. That was the last image recorded of Clara Bennett entering that building as a resident. 3 hours later, a maintenance worker found 78-year-old Harold Wexler dead in his apartment on the 9th floor. The initial explanation seemed obvious: natural causes, an elderly man with a known heart condition. The question that would consume investigators over the next year was not how Harold died, but why the woman who cared for him every day for 3 years walked away with nothing from an estate worth $2.5 million. The address was 415 East Shoreline Drive, apartment 9F, a quiet waterfront building in Port Mason, Oregon. The time of death was estimated between 5:30 and 6 a.m. The mystery was not the body, it was the timing, and it was the money. Harold Wexler had been a civil engineer. He designed bridges and municipal water systems across the Pacific Northwest. By the time he retired at 67, he owned no flashy assets. He lived simply. His wealth accumulated quietly through conservative investments and the sale of his engineering firm. He was widowed at 71. His 2 adult children lived out of state and visited rarely. Clara Bennett met Harold in the fall of 2019. She was 42, recently divorced, working part-time as a home health aide. Harold had slipped in his kitchen and fractured his wrist. The hospital discharge paperwork listed him as independent but at risk. Clara was assigned to assist him for 6 weeks. 6 weeks turned into 6 months, then a year. Neighbors noticed the change. Harold, once withdrawn, began walking the waterfront again. Clara cooked his meals. She managed his medications. She drove him to appointments. She kept meticulous logs as required by the agency, but over time her role became less formal. When the pandemic shut down much of the city, Clara moved into Harold's spare bedroom to reduce exposure risks. There was no contract, no marriage, no adoption papers, just routine. At 7 a.m. every day, Harold took his pills with oatmeal and black coffee. At 8:30, Clara checked his blood pressure. At noon, they ate soup. At 3 p.m., they watched the news. This rhythm continued for 3 years. They don't know this yet, but by the end of the 2nd year, Harold had quietly amended his will. The change was simple. Clara Bennett was added as the primary beneficiary. She was to receive the condominium, the investment accounts, and the remaining cash. The total value at the time was approximately $2.5 million. The will was drafted by a private attorney, notarized, and placed in a safe deposit box at a local bank. Harold did not tell his children. The tension grew slowly. Phone records later showed an increase in calls between Harold and his son Michael beginning in early 2022. The calls were brief, often unanswered. In April, Michael flew to Port Mason unannounced. Witnesses described the visit as strained. Voices were raised in the apartment. A neighbor reported hearing the word manipulation. Another heard inheritance. Clara left the apartment for several hours that afternoon. When she returned, Harold was shaken. He asked her to sit with him that night. In May, Harold's daughter Elaine requested copies of his financial statements. He refused. In June, an attorney representing the Wexler children sent Harold a letter requesting a competency evaluation. Harold ignored it. The motive was not subtle. It was control over the estate. On October 28, 2022, 6 days before Harold's death, Michael Wexler arrived in Port Mason again. This time, he stayed at a hotel near the marina. CCTV footage from the Harbor Point garage shows his rental car entering at 10:12 p.m. He did not use the front desk. He accessed the elevator using a key fob still registered to his name. They don't know this yet, but that access had never been deactivated. Phone metadata shows that at 10:47 p.m., Michael called his sister. The call lasted 3 minutes. No audio was recorded. At 11:05 p.m., Elaine sent an email to their family attorney with the subject line, "Urgent." Between October 29th and November 2nd, a series of quiet actions took place. Harold's banking app registered multiple failed login attempts from an unfamiliar device. A locksmith invoice was later found in Michael's hotel room trash. It listed lock rekeying consultation. No service date was filled in. On the morning of November 3rd, at 5:12 a.m., the heart monitor recorded an irregular rhythm. At 5:18, it stabilized. At 5:26, it spiked again. At 5:34, the monitor went offline. At 5:40 a.m., the building's hallway camera shows Michael exiting the stairwell on the 9th floor. He pauses. He adjusts his jacket. He walks toward apartment 9F. At 5:52 a.m., the camera shows him leaving. No forced entry was found. No signs of struggle. Harold was discovered lying on his bed, hands folded as if placed there. The coroner listed the cause of death as cardiac arrest, with contributing factors including stress. Clara was not in the apartment when the body was found. She had left at 6:15 a.m. with a box of personal belongings. She later told police she had been asked to take a few days off after a family argument. She believed Harold was asleep. They don't know this yet, but that assumption would define the case. The investigation began quietly. There was no homicide designation, but a detective reviewing the CCTV noticed the early morning elevator activity. He noticed Michael's key fob access. He noticed the timing. Financial investigators were brought in when the will was contested. The Wexler children filed an emergency injunction freezing the estate. Their claim was undue influence. They alleged Clara had manipulated an elderly man into rewriting his will. They cited her presence in the home, her control over medications, her isolation of Harold from family. Clara denied it. Her logs were consistent, her bank records showed no unusual deposits, her text messages with Harold were mundane, grocery lists, appointment reminders, weather updates. Then the safe deposit box was opened. The amended will was missing. The bank's access log showed one entry after Harold's death, November 3rd, 9:41 a.m. The person who accessed the box was Michael Wexler, acting under a power of attorney that had been signed 2 days earlier. The signature was shaky. The ink pressure was uneven. A forensic document examiner concluded there were indicators of duress. Investigators reconstructed the final days minute by minute. They mapped Michael's movements. They matched the failed banking logins to his phone's IP address. They found the locksmith consultation. They found an audio voicemail saved on Harold's landline.
It was time-stamped October 31, 22 p.m. Harold's voice was weak but clear. He said, "If anything happens to me, I want it known that Clara did nothing wrong. This is my decision." He doesn't know this yet, but the voicemail would be the turning point. The district attorney reopened the death as suspicious. An exhumation was ordered. Toxicology revealed elevated levels of beta blockers, inconsistent with Harold's prescription dosage. The medication was one Michael had filled the week prior under his father's name. The charge was not murder, it was manslaughter. Michael Wexler was arrested on February 14, 2023. Elaine was charged with conspiracy and forgery. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The defense argued stress and coincidence. The prosecution focused on sequence, access, motive. Short sentences were used during closing arguments. Money, control, timing. The jury deliberated for 9 hours. Michael was convicted. He received a sentence of 12 years. Elaine received 5. The estate was released. The court ruled the amended will valid.
Clara Bennett received the inheritance she had never asked for. She moved out of Harbor Point within a month. The building's lobby camera still records every elevator ride. This case serves as a warning. Caregiving creates proximity. Proximity creates trust. And when money enters that space, the danger is not always where it seems. Sometimes the threat arrives with a familiar name, a valid key, and a belief that entitlement outweighs intent. By the time the truth is clear, the damage is already done.